We're going to start off looking at how people engage with L&D and how that's changing. That's really what we're looking at in this session. And we want to look at how learning is being more and more embedded into the flow of work. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Charles Jennings. Charles is a leading thinker, practitioner and consultant in innovation in learning and performance. He's known globally for his work with the 70-20-10 model. He's the co-founder of the 70-20-10 Institute and a partner at the Internet Time Alliance. He also runs his own consultancy business, Didnt Consultants. Charles's career has included roles such as Chief Learning Officer for Reuters and Thomson Reuters. He's a business school professor, and he's also a member of advisory boards and steering groups for international learning, performance and business bodies. I give you Charles Jennings.
Thanks, George. Yeah, and he sleeps sometime too. Sessions about. I want to open the discussion to Joost and Teresa in terms of what they're doing in their own organisations, and I'm sure you'll be really interested in terms of what they're doing and how they're moving their organisations forward. But I want to really look about new learning models generally, and I wonder whether in the whole area of the question I would throw out is whether in the whole area of learning and performance that we've been focusing on the wrong things. And in fact, when I discussed with Donald Taylor this theme, learning models, I said, actually, I wonder whether we're really talking about learning models. We're actually talking about something wider than what we would consider to be learning models, because as my former colleague and a person quite a few of you will know, I guess, Jay Cross always used to say, one of the main problems in organisational learning is that people can't separate learning from schooling. Because we think about learning being, we design, or we take in some requirements, we design a course or a program, we develop it and deliver it. That's one small bit of how learning occurs. We all know that. In fact, I now refer to 70-20-10 as a performance framework, because there's learning in there, but actually it's wider than learning. So I wonder whether by focusing on learning, we're actually focusing on the wrong thing. We're focusing on input. We're focusing on process. We're not focusing on output. So what I think we need to do is flip our thinking. We need to stop thinking exclusively about learning in order to work and having that learning focus, and we need to flip it and start to think about how we can exploit work in order to learn, and thinking about productivity and performance focus. And that does a number of things in terms of, certainly that's the way the process I've been through over the last few years. It does a number of things in way of making us think differently. In fact, my colleague at the 70-20-10 Institute, Jos Arets, I think says it perfectly when he describes learning as the intelligent byproduct of continuous improvement in organisations. And when you look at what economists say, look at this, a number of Nobel Prize winning economists who say we only learn through work. We don't learn any other way. We only learn by doing. Joseph Stiglitz, Kenneth Harrow, various other Nobel Prize winning experts look at it that way. So another economist, Andries de Grip, and Joost will correct my Dutch pronunciation because I'm sure it's not correct, has done some very interesting longitudinal studies across Europe, and has come to the view that learning isn't 70-20-10 in terms of time people spend learning, but actually about 98% in the workplace. And de Grip says informal learning is far important for human capital development than formal training courses. And actually there's a lot of data in behind this. And I'm not going to go into any detail, but you can if you just do a Google search for IZA and de Grip, you can download this paper of de Grip and his colleagues, and there's some very, very interesting data. There's a sort of summary document. But basically, the point that de Grip makes about when we think about our learning models is that learning in the workplace isn't all equal. Not all types of learning opportunities are equal. Because in this case, in this piece of research, they show that new and challenging activities and cooperating with more experienced colleagues were the most impactful extent to which people learned, very much. And in fact, I published a paper just last year with a man called Jacob Nisgaard, who was, until recently, the head of talent at Ørsted Energy in Denmark, previously called Dong Energy, the world's largest manufacturers of offshore wind farms and wind turbines. And Joachim surveyed his workforce at Ørsted, and then we analysed it, and we came to the view from that sample that increases in job scope, new initiatives, having a role model, an exemplary performer that we could work with or could help us, and fix-its and turnarounds were the major, most impactful learning experiences. Then what Joachim did was he then correlated that with high performers. He looked at the performance data from performance reviews and found that high performers correlate with a number of things. New responsibilities, new challenges, reflection on day-to-day experiences, coaching from exemplary performers, and using conversations as development activities. And again, you can download this paper from the 70-20-10 Institute site. You can get the whole paper and have a look at that. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we think about how we learn in our learning models, we've got to think beyond the classroom, beyond the e-learning module, beyond the course paradigm. And along with these new learning and performance models, we need to also think about how we underpin them with new business models for L&D. And I know that Joost will talk about in Friesland Campaigner, where he works, how, in fact, they're using this to change people's mindset. They're using the 70-20-10 model to change people's mindset. And there's a book that Jos Arets is currently working away writing that's going to be published later on this year, where we've defined 4 business models, moving from order takers, in other words, demands from managers to say we need a new training course on X or Y, through to performance, to learning enablers, where learning is the focus, moving across to the right-hand side where performance is the focus, into performance enablers to business creators. And we have some canvases and so on. We've developed some canvases and some metrics and ways in which we can identify where organisations are and where they want to be and so on. So I'm not going to talk too much more about this other than to just say that one of the tools that I've been using for nearly 18 years now is this 70-20-10 framework, which is all about performance. We describe it as a reference model to support performance and organisational learning, and acts as a practical metaphor to demonstrate the power of informal, social learning, and of course integrate formal learning in organisations. And I would just finish by saying that I think it's important to think about organisational learning in a 21st century way. Organisational learning is not everyone in the organisation having access to as much learning as they possibly can in terms of we produce great resources and wonderful learning pathways and things. Organisational learning is how organisations can become more agile, more responsive, more reactive to change, all those sorts of things. So again, it's coming back from the sort of organisational performance, coming back to how do we support that. So Julie, I'm going to finish on this last slide in that one of the factors which is quite uncomfortable that underpins all of this is the fact that when we look at how we get better at doing our jobs, how our workforces get better at doing our jobs, the learning that occurs is most likely to have greatest impact if it occurs close to the point of use. So that's one thought I'd like to just leave with you, and maybe we can, in some of the questions, we can discuss that coming up. But if you think about that and how it impacts what you're doing in terms of your own learning and development work, if what you're doing is going to have greater impact if it's occurring close to the point of use, how do you make learning equal working? How do you bring those together? So I just leave you with that question before I hand over to Joost.
Over the laptops, just tell you a little bit about Joost. So Joost is going to present us with a case study. And Joost is a learning and development specialist at Friesland Campaigner, a multinational dairy cooperative based in the Netherlands. And Joost has been involved in L&D since 2013 and has devised many e-learning solutions. But he had the opportunity in 2006 to look beyond just e-learning and explore other ways of learning, which had led him to win a Learning Technologies Gold Award just recently. So we'll just wait for Joost to get set up. I'm sure you'll find it a very interesting case study. So you're going to come in after this. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project that we did at Freedom Campina. The question is, for you, if you're thinking about where are you thinking about if I'm having about the word seamless support? For me, is seamless support something, and this is true, when I'm coming home and I slide this one, my telephone is asking me if I want some music when I'm home. And I slide to the right, and then you're seeing here, I can make a decision. The thing in my home is helping me to make my life a little bit comfortable. And what I want, and I believe therein, is that we as learning and development professionals, that we need to make the life of our employees more comfortable when they're working. And that the performance will be on the max level. What we did last year is we won the best learning technology project, international and commercial sector, and I'm very proud of that. We won a gold award. We invested only €1,000, and together with my team at that moment, we spent 320 hours after making a solution to make their performance a little bit better. We saved at this time €248,000. My name is Joost Smilde, and I'm a learning and development specialist. I'm 31 years old. I've studied business administration, so I don't have an educational background in education science. I'm from the Netherlands, if you can hear that. Who am I? I'm a little bit out of the box thinking. So I'm always searching to other solutions for our specialism. Visual-minded, enthusiastic, very creative, they said about me. I don't say that. And I'm a little bit chaotic, so I hope that you can follow me. I'm an expert in e-learning. You can see here I've made lots of e-learnings here, for example, a game, but also I simulated robots for our company. And here you can see for a little bit smaller, simpler, as work assignments, workplace assignments. Social collaboration, I implemented the platform in social collaboration. Safety 2010, of course, this one. And integrating processes. Today we are going to talk about Safety 2010, but I'm not going to say what is safety and what is 20 and what is 10. I hope that you can find the elements in my story and that you can see it where I plotted that. First, I want to sketch you a little bit about the situation where I'm working. I'm working for Friesland Campina. It's a dairy company, and they're working 22,000 employees. And if you talk about the dairy company, it always starts with the cow. And the farmers are milking. And with that milk, we try to add the most value to our products, so that the farmers get real money for the milk, and we can make real money to produce, for example, butter, cheese, you can name it. Oh, something's there. Butter, cheese. Here are some examples of our brands. I don't know if you recognize anyone, but I don't know if he is so in English a very thing. But I want to zoom in on one product that we are producing. That's infant formula. Someone knows what infant formula is? Baby milk powder. There is a factory in the east of the Netherlands. They asked me this. This was my original question. How to train operators to prevent common errors in the packaging process and to resolve them more quickly. If it was 4 years ago, I was for sure that I'm going to create an e-learning, for example. But at this time, I didn't do that. They only have 1 hour, because our world is changing, and we only have 1 hour to solve this problem, to solve the common errors in the factory. And if they don't solve this common error, there will be a shutdown for the whole factory because it is a high-tech factory and we change everything to each other. And every shutdown cost 42,000 euros. Now I'm going to try to sketch you a little bit about the previous situation, how an operator would live at that moment in the factory. Here you can see some Excel documents. Yeah, sorry, it's Dutch. But you can see here some Excel documents, and they're walking every 2 hours, and they're doing checks. And they're doing checks, and they're saying, okay, is this metal detection okay? We need to do those checks because of the fact we need to guarantee a high standard of producing our products. And if something is wrong, they are writing remarks in those Excel documents. And when they're walking checks and operating their line, and an error occurred, and they don't have the experience to solve this. Then they start to dig in a pile of papers. They are searching for the knowledge to solve this error. In binders, OneNote, or in Excel documents, everyone has the same experience, everyone has the same problem in their factory. And what we did, we combined what they do all the day with the problem solving and started coding. I said to the plant managers, just watch this. We did it 10 times more. By the way, it's easy to do. You can learn it. So we did it on our own. What you saw there is a continuous improvement team. So we are not talking about learning and development anymore. Of course, we have a learning and development. I'm going to tell you now a little bit about the journey of this project. What did we do and what did us made that we have only 10 weeks and we created this app. But first what I did, and I talked with the manager, and but I mentioned this in the first of my presentation, I talked about how I automated my home. And we had that you need to create a need, that you need to change and think differently about how to solve problems in the factory instead of only training. Then we selected, of course, the right project members, and then we started to analyze, to start to search for the performance gaps. And I did it, of course, to map their workflow, what you can see here, but we were also mapping what kind of errors were there at that moment, and what kind of errors we could make the most savings. Then we start to prioritize the results from the analysis with the stakeholders and give us a focus. After that, we had a brainstorm session. Everyone knows how a brainstorm session works, so I don't talk about a little bit about that more. But this was a very interesting step, is that you are creating an epic. You think about what you need to do, what will solve this problem really, and not only train. And we did this on paper. We didn't even know how to program an app or something. So we stick that on paper. After that, you're becoming okay, what do we now need? What do we need to create this app? And I can tell you, we used Power Apps. There's an Office 365 tool where you can integrate business things. You make your work a little bit easier. And then we started to change our mindset. If it is not possible, can we make it possible? In your group, you need to take your team with you to create the things that they really need. And then we started to learn. And in one weekend, the first things were there. We designed and we built our first app. And you can imagine if an operator was coming to me and said, "Oh, when I'm clicking on this, we are going to the next page. And after that, you can direct link your documents. You can do this, you can do that. We can create a live dashboard. That is what we're creating also from the data that is put in the app. So it's a little bit of an agile method what we used. And because of we experimented continually with the users, the implementation phase was very short. On Friday, we implemented it, and on Monday, every batch was logged, everything. It was incredible. And then we did a shadow run on the plans, and the first savings were there because they use this all the time. They use this tablet. They don't have it within the desk or something, but they use it. So if there is an error, they solve it directly. Here you can see what kind of team I had at that moment. Can you a little bit follow me? I'm going to show you now. Here you see our learning design, and what you're seeing here on the left side is the working consultation. And then we have during production, of course, and then again you hand over your work again within the working constellation. First of all, I want to zoom in a little bit of the during production. What we did, we made seamless support when data is not correct. So color coding. Here you have an example of that what we made. We're now going to production, productie in Dutch, and they're clicking on that. As you can see here, then they fill their name in, but you see here all the fill-in fields what they need to do their job. But you see also the green things in front of that there's direct linked to their own work instructions. Here you can also see it's red when it's not correct, but when it's green, it's correct what they fill in. So they get direct support from this app. If it is okay, it's green. If it's not okay, you need to do something. Direct links to work instructions. I'm going to show you that now. We are going now to one of those icons, be in front of that, so that you know how you do those checks. So we're loading now Microsoft Teams, maybe interesting. It's just, and they can talk about this document and they can see it. So you have the sort of social collaboration within the app. And when they send this and they put their remarks in, we made a process that our quality department is updating our documents automatically, so that we create a little bit of self-learning systems. But we also do this embedded sharing of knowledge in the workflow. Everything what they do in this app is logged within a database. Here they are, and when there is, for example, an error, they are eager to share this in the process. They want to share everything. If they have IDs, they can send that to also a database, and we can learn all from that. So learning is more than only training in this case. And you can see here an overview of the last checks. They can learn from the checks what they did in the history, but also the latest faults, the latest errors. They can learn from people how they solved that without even knowing it. They don't know that they are sharing knowledge, but they do. Solving errors a standardized way. That's the original question. And then we're doing it like this. This was not acting, by the way, it was real. You can see the red lines there. It was reeling in the shutdown. They're scanning their QR code now, and it's sending them directly to the solution of the problem at that moment. And because the QR code is creating a context so that you can filter in front of it. Here you do a standardized way to solve those errors. And we made a standard. Inform your team leader. Start, analyze. The app is deciding what kind of decisions you need to make. And we decide and we improve that together. Then they select what kind of disruption is there. So they click, for example, on that one. And then they select the cause, and then they get the answer. And then you think, yeah, all the answers are not in the app. No, that's true. There we have also made a solution of that. If it is different, I'm going now, if it is different, then you can make a picture of it, and it's going to it's sent it to a database. You can select use, I want to use this one, or I want to take another one. And then you ask the operator, the system is helping them to give the right information to become better. So which steps did you have made to solve this problem? And which steps are you going to make to solve this problem also in the future? So that you're creating, with this data, a better working environment and more knowledge at the right place for the people. Because, besides of this, we already solved the solution, you already said, the problem that we had in the factory. But there is also team learning. And we made a live dashboard, and they are talking about that when they do a working consultation. You can see it here, and they can directly click. For example, on this one, you see the fault by the seal, click, and you see exactly where the fault was, where it was, what kind of temperature there was, and how they can act on that. So they can learn from each other, with each other, discuss that. We call this data in, filter data back, so you can filter the data back and that they can help them. And we call it data-driven learning. You learn from your data. So a little bit of a summarize what I already said. You need to embed the knowledge in their work, and not creating a Spark. Nothing to do with the Spark for our operators. But you need to embed when they want to share their knowledge, and not asking them 3 weeks later, what did you do at that moment? In the year of 2020, I'm going to zoom in on a main production process, and I'm going to tell you how I'm seeing it in 2020. We have an IT, and we are very good in tracking and tracing our product. It's produced at that time with this temperature, etc. But what we are forgetting at this moment is the people. We are forgetting what they think. We are forgetting what they do. We are forgetting. We are not tracking and tracing this at this moment. And I hope, and I call this the green thing, the human performance backbone. I want to have them all tablets in their hands, and that we can learn from their steps. That they can send data and things and thoughts to a system, and that we can create galleries that will create data that supports them in their context on the time that they need it, with the trends, etc. You can a little bit compare this with your Facebook page, but then we call it Workbook. So what this does is it is continuously improve on people and method. It's continuously create content. We have a self-learning system at this moment. Continuously learn from each other. Continuously analyze. You can analyze your data continuously to be continued. I'm not done yet.
Look around. Technology is all around us. We use it in every aspect of our lives. It enables us to do amazing things. But what if we could go further? What if we could go beyond the screen?
Yes, it's very easy, I think, to accomplish, only we need to convince our business to go with us. My learnings is think big, but start small. I have this only one line improved, with big results. We have 100 lines, you can imagine. Okay, 100. Co-creation with the business is key for success. Short iteration within project steps, agile, work agile, don't be slow, don't implement big learning management systems. It's costing lots of time and you can't make results in that time. You are already, kill your darlings. Please kill your darlings, stop with e-learning. Just stop with it. I hate it, sorry. 70-20 is not a rule, it's not a rule. It's a mindset. Thank you very much.
Do some questions.
We're going to stop between these so that you have a chance if there's any questions you'd like to ask. Yes, but I think that a couple of really important points. I think back to what I said earlier on. You may not see this as a learning model. I certainly see it as a performance model. You may not see it as something that you already do. Whether you see it as a role, an existing part of an L&D role, It clearly is. In Friesland Campina, it clearly is. The other thing that struck me was that you talked initially, I think, €1,000 input plus time, nearly $250,000 output. And if I'm right, you said that value wasn't reported by LT, that value was reported by the stakeholders.
Yes, it was reported by the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the things that Joost has picked out that are very clear in terms of the methodology we use around 70-20-10, it was around really understanding the critical business problems, identifying the critical tasks, what is it that needs to get done, or when it breaks that really causes value to be lost, it causes, in your case, production to stop.
Yes.
Co-creation with the stakeholders, and just coming back to the quote I put from Joost, my colleague, that, and I think this is a perfect example of it, is that Joost says that learning is the intelligent byproduct of continuous improvement. And as you're saying, you're learning from that process rather than learning to. How many classes and courses did you produce for this?
Nothing. I didn't do any training for this one.
Any questions or observations?
Joost, it seems a little bit static now, in the sense you started high motivation of a pilot group,
yes.
But of course, once the process gets more managed,
yeah.
maybe the window of opportunity and maybe the motivation of so there's a transition to more people, to a bigger group. So how do you keep it kind of going? Second thing is the opportunities for the individuals to improve the process, because that is part of the motivation. Now you're someone that once you go further with automation, in fact you automate yourself a little bit, your autonomy a little bit away. How do you think about the future in that sense?
I think the autonomy of the operator, you mean, or the autonomy of the learning and development space?
No, autonomy of the operator.
Now, what they are doing now at this moment, they are not continuously do their job right. They learn, and the process will be better. It is already be better. But what they are doing now more is that they are improving and analyzing to improve their process more and more. So what they are doing is they are doing this right. So, for example, their work will be more interesting than it was. It is already in high tech factory. They are working not that much people anymore. And I think that people need to think a little bit differently, so to improve their process instead of pushing the buttons. And that makes their work a little bit more fun, more engagement. And that's also what I think about that, is that we as learning and development professionals can improve the engagement on the work floor.
There's just one other question before we move on. So.
Just very briefly, can you tell us a bit about the experience? At some point you had to include stakeholders.
Yes.
So these are people that know a bit about the process. You had to get their insight because you wouldn't know it, I guess, at some level.
No.
Tell us about your experience of working with the stakeholders, what it was really like,
yeah.
how you came to choose who was a good stakeholder and who you should probably stay away from.
Yeah, to be honest, that's you need to, I think, it's not luck, you need to convince them that you need to take two with them, and you need to make what they already said in the morning in the keynote. You need to have an example that they know in their own real life, that they acknowledge that what you're doing, that it could be much cheaper, much easier to get the performance that you want. And I think that's your question.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much to Joost for his presentation. We'll have time to ask him more questions later. We're going to move on now to Teresa, and Teresa is a learning and talent expert at Eon UK, and where she provides in-house performance consultation for business-to-business operation and supports functions as part of Eon's talent programmes. Teresa?
Hello everyone, and thank you for the
We can't.
to listen to our stories. I'm going to talk about
how we've started to modernise learning at Eon, and also the context in terms of how the business has changed substantially. I've been with the organisation for 10 years, and like many organisations, it's a traditional legacy-based organisation, and the raft of change and how that's impacted the business, and hence how that's impacted what we do in learning and development. And to give you a bit of context around that, this is, on the left, is what the traditional energy market looked like when I entered that world. Very much around the system, very slow around fossil fuel and nuclear, and very large scale and central. So it meant that processes were very slow. Building a power station takes a very long time, and our strategy at that time was to be the largest investor-owned power and gas company in the world, which sounds a little bit like an Austin Powers film or something, like a Bond villain coming to take over the energy world. And now it's changed to this. So we've gone from that pipeline type energy model to a connected energy world, and it's technology that's driven that. So we've gone to a customer-centric model, very much a customer-centric model, which has been there probably for about 4 or 5 years and is really embedded in the organisation now. Moving across to green and clean technologies, so Eon does not do anything that's on the left anymore. It's purely renewables and solutions. And that's where the green and clean technologies come in, and we also do a lot of work around smaller scale distributed energy systems as well. And it's changed our purpose radically in terms of what we do, and for the next 5 years we're very much focused on looking at how our customers' behaviours and providing personalised energy solutions for them. And that's homes and businesses. So we work a lot with businesses in terms of, for example, Marks and Spencer's. We are a key partner in their Plan A. You wouldn't know that, but a lot of Eon employees are on Marks and Spencer's sites in Marks and Spencer's uniforms, and they've helped deliver Plan A for that organisation. And I was talking about customer centricity. So in the business, we've done a lot of work around understanding our customers. So we bring people in, customers and non-customers. All of our board attend these sessions. They don't tell the customers who they are, and they listen firsthand to the issues that our customers have. And then we also do a lot of surveying around customers. We use Net Promoter Score, but we use that in quite a intelligent way in terms of looking at the actual information we gather rather than the initial 0 to 10 score. And then we apply design thinking. So that's not dissimilar to what we've heard in the previous case study, is that process around how you gather the insights and then how you go on to design the right solutions for the customers or solve problems that are there. So it might be new products or solving problems the customer doesn't even know that they have. And that's how we develop the solutions. So we've got a lot of new solutions that are being brought onto the market, numerous that are out there. But I'll give you a little bit of history now around what that's meant for our learning and development function in HR, so you can understand the context a little bit more. So some of the changes that we've gone through, nip to my screen here so I can see that better. So when I first joined, there was a local L&D and HR model, so we service different business units. We went through a lot of change and we implemented the Ulrich model within the UK. So that's where we went to centres of competence. And then that went global. So we took the learning out of local business models and centralised it, and used a lot of master vendors as well. So we had global centres of competence and a global learning and development strategy, not a local strategy anymore. And then we split the business. So that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that we've gone away from that fossil fueled business and we sold all that off and split the company into this other company called Uniper, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. And that changed the business makeup, and we became this solutions-focused business that I talked about at the very first slide. We implemented a social intranet, which changed a lot of the ways that we work. And we came up with a brand new brand, which is About Tomorrow, and a very, very different look. It was a huge change. Brand changes. Now we're in this stage, which is Phoenix, and what we've done is we've dismantled, that's the term, dismantled all of those centres of competence in HR and put them back locally, because we need to be more local to our customers. So we're in a state of change at the moment, and that's what's being delivered and implemented this year. So it's how do we start to put L&D back into the business. And this gave me an idea when I knew this was happening, because we knew this was coming a year or so ago, is how can I start to find out about what the business needs in order to deliver the right learning solutions, modalities, etc. And we were very much a one-size-fits-all, so that global learning framework meant that we were delivering global products out to all regions, and we knew that it didn't work, but we didn't have that information and that data about the differences. And also this, I mean, generally in conversations with stakeholders, you didn't have the data and the evidence, and that was also a real driving factor for me, is how do we gather that evidence to be able to have those conversations with stakeholders to drive change. So Deming has a great line there, without data you're just another person with an opinion, and that's really how we were looked at with those conversations with stakeholders. So what we did is we worked with a partner, and we had a project called Learner Insights, and it had 3 steps to it. It had focus groups, it had a global survey out to all of our regions, and then gathering those insights and looking at ways we could deliver things differently from what our customers, our internal customers, were telling us that they wanted. So the focus groups were delivered in Germany. We're a German company, if you weren't aware, so that's where a majority of our employees are, and also the UK. So we started with the focus groups first, and we delivered 8 of those, and we interviewed 74 people from across different areas of the business. We then did a global survey, which had a lot of work attached to it, because we had to go through workers' councils for Germany. It was something we had never ever done before in L&D, so it was brand new. There was a lot of survey fatigue at the time. It went out when pulse checks and pride surveys were going out at the same time. But we got that many responses, which is around about 10% of the organisation, which is pretty good going, really. We got a high level of completion, and this is the regions that they came from. Now, Germany is our biggest region, as I mentioned. UK is the second largest, but it went out to 7 regions in different languages. The other regions are smaller. And 80% of the completions were employees. Now, normally, a lot of the surveys that we do tends to be among the leadership and management population. So it was really good to get input from our employees. Surprising results. So when you have a mirror held up to yourself in L&D or wherever, when it's your baby, it can be a bit uncomfortable. So it's dropping that ego and really listening to the feedback. And I went into the focus groups and helped deliver them. And yeah, it's a bit scary and eye-opening. So I'm going to show you some of the data now. And this is looking at really 70-20-10. There was 36 questions in the survey, by the way. I'm not going to cover all of it. I'm pulling out data that I feel is most relevant to this session to help you. So this is the modes of learning that people use. So 46% classroom, 10% e-learning. And these are global stats, but I will show you some regional stats as well and some of the other areas. Learning from each other, 50% say my team. 34% from the meetings that they go to. Now, we have got a very meeting-driven culture, so that's probably why. And I would also say with the first part, it's what we also drive as an organisation through what we offer. So there's also some things to bear in mind when you're looking at this data. And then the self-directed, unsurprisingly, it's Google. And if we have a look at some of the data here, I'm going to come a bit closer. This is where you can see, pointer, what preferences people had for different learning methods. And we can see the top 4 regions here. Where it's in green, they're higher than the global target figure. Where it's in red, they're coming up substantially lower. But you can see the number one way that people want to learn is to work in collaboration with one another and their team members at 90%, which is ranked 1. And if we look at the company LMS, it's down there at number 11. And where were we investing a lot of our money in our content? The LMS. Support from manager is high there, and we know how critical that is to transfer of learning, but you can see that varies across then different regions, and Romania really stood out as very much line manager involvement there, and that's down to the work that the local L&D expert was doing. So it shows how important it is to build those relationships with the business. Is there any questions on that? Because it's quite a lot of data, so is there anything, if you want to ask any questions on it, then happy to. I'll leave that up there a little bit longer so you can... and then we looked at one area is how self-directed. So we kind of had the assumption that people needed to be spoon-fed and told, but we found out that wasn't really what was happening. So 90% of our people said they were responsible for managing their own learning. So self-direction and self-motivation is clearly there. 59% happy to engage in online learning without prompting. So without us doing some campaign or marketing, they would look for online learning themselves. 72% by finding things out for themselves. And 93% like to learn at their own pace, so they don't want to be forced to learn in a particular way. A bit more data on that. 78% say they make time to reflect on learning. 66% just like to learn for the sake of learning, so their motivation is they purely love to learn. People know how to build a personal learning network, and they have a clear personal plan, but we do have quite a PDP-driven culture of people recording what they want to learn and develop. And we looked at areas that people might want that we didn't currently offer, and mobile learning was one of the key areas that people wanted, which isn't, again, unsurprising. And are our people learning all the time? Now, this is where some of the most surprising results in. So we asked, how many hours a week do you think you are spending learning at work? You can see that only 2% of our organisation thought that they're learning all the time, which was one of the most surprising and biggest eye-opening results for us. And that varied substantially by job role, because I was able to look at job role in regions by this as well. And that the average is 1 to 2 hours a week. So it makes you think about how you deliver your content, how much time people have got, and it fits into that time-starved learner. And then you can see a little bit more by job role there, how that varies. Global figures, but I was able to look at that by region as well, so I was able to give the regions their data. So you can see that executives and apprenticeships, which is not surprising, are those that are learning more of the time. The role of line manager I'm going to look at as well, because that's so critical. So 73% said their manager actually makes time for them to learn, so that's a positive. And discusses learning at review. As I mentioned, we've got a performance-driven culture. But it's the discussion around what that learning is and the objectives, so it's very much, oh, well, I've decided I want to do this, okay, well, it'll give you the time to do it. But there's less emphasis on that reinforcement and putting that learning into practice in the workplace. So that was an eye-opening result for us, and how do we encourage more of that? And then we looked at some of the barriers. And this is a key quote from Burson, is there's no lack of great content. The difficulty lies in building that integrated learning experience. And I think that's what we've seen, where that design thinking part comes in, and really looking at the end-to-end journey. So this is what they think of us in terms of our content. So this is some of those things we think, okay, right. 35% find content uninspiring, which is a significant amount. Can't find what they need. We don't make it that easy with the LMS, etc. You're driven by the system in terms of people trying to find things, hence probably why it's 11th on the list as well. A lot of people think that the content is irrelevant to them because it's not that personalised. It was that one-size-fits-all. Objectives are unclear in terms of what do you actually want me to learn and why am I learning this. And time, which we've seen from that other data. So where do they go instead? They ask the people that they work with. They ask if they know. They surround themselves with people that they can learn from. They actually don't necessarily always go to Google first. They maybe think a bit more critically about, is what I'm getting from Google the right place? Should I actually go there first? They start with their network. And then we looked at some of the learning channels. So we compared some of the data as well with external data from Towards Maturity, which is out there in the public domain. And if you don't use it already, I would recommend that you do, because if you haven't got your own data, that's useful to take into stakeholder conversations. So we looked at, well, what do our colleagues do inside and outside of work? What channels do they use? So what channels can we then start to tap into to put learning more into the workflow for them? And some of the key areas were YouTube and Pinterest that stood out. That inside work, it was much, much lower usage than what they were using outside of the workplace. So that was very useful data for us and an eye-opener. And then where did we go with some of this data? So in the business, we create personas of our customers so that we can design for them. So we use this insights to start creating those learner personas. And I'm just going to show you a couple. So this is actually for our compliance team work with data for their area, and they were looking at what do people that are coming into our business need. And these are even two different people having totally different requirements for induction, either into a new role or into the organisation or a department. So this was broken down into what are their needs, what are their backgrounds, and what does that necessarily mean for when you're designing a learning experience for them. And then we've got another one there. So totally different needs. So this has helped when you start out with a project is gathering that information. And this is really like a persona for the whole of Eon. As I mentioned, it's global data, and this summarises really the data from both the focus groups, the open questions on the survey, and some of the data from the survey. So it tells us what they want from the future of learning, and it reminds me a little bit of the Bursin Modern Learner infographic. So they felt that we gave too much jargon, and they actually had the phrase, everything's Eonised, that it's got to be on brand, etc., etc. Does that really matter? More autonomy. They felt a lot rather spoon-fed, which is something I mentioned earlier. Follow-up is lacking. So it was really giving more evidence to some of that data when we took the focus group, and open statements are variety, more open, shorter, bespoke, clarity, knowing what I need and where I need to go for it. And then some of the things that people said is like people are being bombarded and being offered so much, it isn't clear what it all is, and can it be more relevant, can we resonate with it, and not knowing the aim and those things. So that's what people are wanting from the future of our learning ecosystem. We've done some things already, so I'll talk about a couple of those. We were very lucky that at the time that we started to learn our insights, we also had the social intranet implemented, which gave us a lot of opportunities that we could do some quick wins. So because people want to learn from one another, implemented group reverse mentoring across the group, and that's really working quite organically and growing. So people go on the site, they register, they find a match, they can work virtually or meet up if they're in similar locations. And that was originated really out of thinking, how can we be more digital, and how can we use the younger people in our organisation to mentor more senior execs. And also working out loud. So we implemented John Stepper's working out loud methodology, which is about working in collaboration and working in groups and learning from others. And I put my money where my mouth is, and I was reverse mentored, and I also joined a working out loud circle as well, so I could learn from that experience that we were offering to our learners. And that's really it so far from where we've got. We're looking very much more into detailed learning journeys for different projects. We are able to talk to our stakeholders with much more power in our conversations now, much more credibility, and getting listened to and being able to change their mindsets and deliver things very differently. So that's where we've got, that's our journey so far at the moment. Some of it's uncertain, but there's some excitement around that as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. Just before we open up to general questions, a couple of observations I've got, and it'd be interesting to hear your response. One was, did the organisational change, changing business model for Eon with separation from Uniper and the whole change focus, did that reflect back into this work? Is that one of the drivers for the changing way in developing focus groups and gathering this data and looking at how you do things differently?
It wasn't one of the main drivers. One of the main drivers really was around we didn't know anything about our learners, and also how it's probably about efficiency as well and effectiveness. So around having that data to make very good investment decisions in learning as well was really important. To be quicker and more agile, because they were the things that are important to the new business in terms of that linking into your question. But the main driver was that, well, how do we start to change things if we don't have any data to help us to do things differently than we already are?
Sure. Thank you. Any questions to Teresa?
Gentleman at the back. Gentleman at the back.
Oh, sorry, at the back. I'm sorry, didn't see that.
Yes, two questions. In the complex table you presented, I couldn't read it fast enough. Was there a request in your needs analysis for mentoring and coaching? And the second question is, how many people saw simulations and gaming, serious gaming, as a learning experience?
Yeah, we did. There was a lot of questions in there, and I haven't covered all the data there. We did look at gaming being, for example, that came out higher as a need for younger employees. We have used it a little in some of our projects, but not very much. But yeah, younger employees were asking for that as something that we didn't currently do. So how would you like to learn if it was available? That came out.
And coaching and mentoring?
Coaching and mentoring, yes, that came out very strongly in terms of I'd like a mentor, I'd like to be coached in ways of how I might want to learn.
And you are aware, though, that the stats on gaming and learning, or serious gaming and learning, skew toward the 40 plus, not the younger millennials.
Yeah, that in our stats it came as the lower age group, or more in apprenticeships, graduates. It came out stronger in there, though it was across the groups, but that was where it was highest for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question.
I think that's an interesting point. One of the questions that's in my head is that these self-reported surveys are really useful to give you insight, but they often sort of generate secondary questions. And I was intrigued, Teresa, you said that of the surveys you did, time taken in learning was about 4%.
Yeah.
That was really, and the question to me came, when you look at the GRIP and the researchers, they carried out a 10-year study, longitudinal study in the Netherlands around how much time do people spend learning. And it varied by age. The younger you were, you tended to report that you were spending more time the older. And over time, over the 10 years, the time spent learning went up. And the figures were, and I just had a quick look, the figures were went from around 30% to 50% for younger folks. It's really intriguing. That's a big difference. So that would raise a question about whether is that a social culture, a national cultural difference, or is that a corporate cultural issue or difference or whatever? So they often raise sort of new questions to explore.
Yeah. So if you're looking at your own data, you could make assumptions from external data and think that your organisation's the same, and then actually find, because the context is king at the end of the day. Yeah. So if you don't gather your own data, then you might be making more errors around what you offer in terms of learning and making assumptions still.
Sure, that's right, because obviously different cultures within organisations, all sorts of factors will impact that, And that's where the paper that I wrote with you from NISCAR, it was really useful to form Dong Energy. Really useful to have that data from their own people, because then having conversations in terms of how they can approach utilising that, it becomes meaningful because it's data that your own people are giving you.
Yeah. Lady in red.
Is there a possible takeaway for me in my new
role. I found it really interesting from your slides, the emphasis on the employees' self-motivation and their own potential to learn. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, my impression was that there is also an important role of the manager in the follow-up phase and in, at a certain point you mentioned, enabling the content that the people learn and the fact that they are actually applied in everyday work. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this role of the manager can be addressed with, in your experience, with this learning model, with the same contents, or should it be approached in a different way?
We're finding that we're getting that change with having these conversations. The thing I'm finding myself referring to a lot at the moment is Ebbinghaus. Is I'm saying you taking people and you think you're sending them to an event, and to coin, I think it's Michelle Parry-Slater's phrase, you think they're going to be injected with education and they're going to come back and they're going to behave completely differently, which isn't the case. So I'm saying to them, you know, would you invest something and then expect to lose 90% on it in a month's time? Well, that's what you're largely doing with the way that you're looking at learning. So unless you give people space and time to put things into practice, and you're very targeted with what you're asking them to do, and you have those conversations with them, then that's what's happening, and you're going to get the same problems reoccurring in your business, and you'll think, oh no, we'll send them to another course. So that's been the conversations that I'm having, is having far more challenging conversations, having that confidence to do that now, because I've got the information. I mean, one example is there's a new project we're just starting to give agents, customer service agents, real-time feedback from our customers and expect them to reflect in the moment, think about how they need to change, contact the customer and deal with that issue there and then. And they're talking very much about reflective behaviours. And then I'll be able to say to the stakeholders at the very beginning of this project, but these are the group that reflect least, think they don't learn, they learn 0% of the time, but you're expecting them to learn in the moment and make those behavioural changes in how they're dealing with a customer. Before, I couldn't have had that conversation. And this is with the line managers there, who they're expecting them to coach there and then as well. So that's how it's shifted the types of more powerful conversations that I can have on these subjects, because I can break the data down. But I wouldn't say I'm purely relying on that data. I'm also suggesting that we then delve deeper with that group and run some small focus groups and prototype as well, rather than develop something that's fully ready to go out there and expect it to work, is to do far more prototyping and iteration and being agile in the way that we develop learning and development. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Yeah. We can ask questions. Can I just pick up on your point there? I think that the role of managers is really critical. That when we're looking at these new learning models, whether it's Friesland Campina, who's working, within the flow of work, or whether it's with the work Teresa's doing, it's very much about managers. And there's some really good evidence to show that managers who are effective and focused at developing their people, those people outperform others. In fact, the Corporate Executive Board did a study years ago that showed effectively an extra day a week from everyone in terms of work input. And I also just would add one thing on to your quote from Deming there. Another great management guru once said, Charles Handy, who many of you will know, once said there are three roles, and he said this many years ago, but I think it holds true. There are three roles in the UK, and I'm sure it transfers, for which there is no preparation: politicians, parents, and managers. Now, I would say that we're probably better at preparing people for parenthood now, but the other two haven't really moved at all. And I think it was the 1960s that Charles Handy wrote that.
Gentleman here has another question.
Another question for you is, how do you prioritize for this year? Because it's a huge amount of opportunities to improve, and it's more to make a choice and say no than go for every win. So what's your program now based on what you told us?
It's looking at what are the big ticket items for the organisation. One being agile. working across sort of the big items for issues that we've got within the business or areas that we want to really change. So it's around digital capability, agile, and looking at how we implement and design or craft learning experiences a far more different way than what we would have done before. I'm finding I'm getting involved in and being part of a team rather than learning sort of sitting separately. So I think it's moving in terms of shifting organically rather than necessarily because we haven't got a structure. It's giving us a bit more freedom to work in the business and in the team where before it was very much an order taker model. So it's shifting in towards more of that performance enabler and being in those conversations from a very early start and helping shape things with using that information.
The German culture will allow you to?
Well, I didn't say that I was working in the German Centre of Competence. I was in that global centre for 3 years, and now I'm back in the UK. And in the UK it's much freer, so I'm not in that environment anymore. So it was tougher, to get those things done. I would say to get that survey up and running, and the amount of hoops it had to jump through with Workers' Council. So I do understand they have to look at any of our products that we might want to use and check those off before we launch them into the business. So I do understand how tough it can be in Germany. One thing I would want to add that I didn't say in my presentation is how useful this has been with the suppliers that we work with in driving that partnership working far more, because we've shared the data with them, which means we're able to get better value from supplier relationships as well.
Okay, do you have any other questions? Lady there.
I think at the heart of any strategy should be your ability to connect with people. So how do you design a strategy specifically for millennials who have an attention span of like 5 seconds, who are not impressed by anything you do? How do you create a strategy around that?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, let you take that.
I would actually challenge that presumption that millennials have attention spans very short. In fact, some of the most millennial thinking people I know are older than me. So I think that it's not chronological age. I think that there is we all live with multiple distractions all the time. You see the data that we're all distracted continually, and there's all sorts of things. I think there's certainly an issue in terms of how we focus what we do that comes in line with that, and how we. And I think my view is that the rise in the last year and a half of microlearning. Actually, microlearning is nothing new. Microlearning is. I can remember. I'm sorry to be an old man talking here, but I remember reviewing interactive video programs, superb ones, done in the 1980s, and they were an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And then we had e-learning that came down to be, shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's simply a response to the changing environment. So certainly any strategy needs to think about how we can support people in the moment. And I think what Joost is talking about, which is almost the end point of saying, don't take people away from learning. Don't even let them need to think about learning. And the gentleman who's gone at the back earlier talking about game-based learning and simulations and so on, that's great, but actually a lot of people don't have time for that. So we need to think, and it's not just millennials, I think it's everyone. So we need to think in our strategy about how we can provide support and help people do their jobs better, and without taking them away from their jobs, or taking them away from focusing on their jobs as little as possible. And that's a challenge. I mean, it really is. In that way, I agree with you. It's a real strategic challenge in terms of how we do that.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, and I'm sure you will probably want to get in the lunch queue. So thank you very much, but also thank you very much to our panel.